Hello, good evening and welcome. Hang on, let me just turn my video on before we get going. There we go. Good evening and welcome to our webinar tonight on the very fascinating exotic location of the tiny Himalayan kingdom of Bhutan. My name's Jonny Bealby. I founded Wild Frontiers, and first can I just say how exciting it is to have so many people with us tonight. I think we have around about 250, 260, which is great, especially considering we don't have too many of our American friends tonight, because of course it is Thanksgiving. So if you are watching from America, a very happy Thanksgiving. If you are not and watching this retrospectively, we hope you had a lovely day and enjoy the webinar retrospectively. I think having so many people on just illustrates how fascinating we find this tiny little kingdom stuck up there in the Himalayas. It resonates with travelers today as much as it has done for the last 20 years or more. Mostly desperate to see the stunning mountains, the impressive dzongs that cling to the hillsides, and to experience the beautiful, clear environment. Did you know Bhutan was the first country in the world to ban plastic bags? It has many primal forests, many of which have these beautiful mosses that grow off the side of the trees, old man's beard, I think it's called. And of course, to meet the Bhutanese people, who famously place more importance on gross domestic happiness than they do on gross domestic product. So before we get started, I am going to tell you a little bit about how this evening's going to unfold. First of all, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how my own story, how I got Wild Frontiers going, and how Bhutan became a part of our portfolio of trips. Then I'm going to hand over to our guest speaker, Bradley Mayhew, Lonely Planet's Bradley Mayhew, who will talk for about 40 minutes about Bhutan. He'll then hand over to Marc, who many of you will know, our Director of Product and Operations, who will talk you through one of our group tours there. And then, of course, we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So if you have any questions that you would like to ask, then please just use the Q&A button at the bottom. And then tomorrow we will send out an email. Mike will send out an email which will include a link to the recording of tonight's webinar. So if you wanted to watch it again, you want to share it with friends, or you have to dash off halfway through tonight, then you'll be able to catch up with it all tomorrow. We'll also put some more relevant links that we hope you'll find interesting in that. So before we start, let me share my screen and we can get going. So where were we? We were on that, were we not? End of the video. Okay, so let me tell you very quickly. So in the 90s, those of you that have watched these webinars below will know this story, but in the 90s, I did 3 big adventures. I drove a motorbike right the way around Africa. I walked through parts of India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan into the Hindu Kush, and I rode a horse along the Silk Road. These 3 big trips gave rise to my 3 travel books, Running with the Moon, about the motorcycle journey for a pagan song, about the walk through India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, and Silk Dreams, Troubled Road, the horse journey along the Silk Road. But again, those of you that know me and know my background will know that my first love has always been the Indian subcontinent. Partly, of course, because it's kind of in my family's blood. My mother was born in Bangalore. I won't give you the year because she'll be embarrassed, but suffice to say, during the dying days of the Raj. This is my grandmother, my grandfather, my mother, and my uncle in that picture. They grew up in Bangalore and also in Cochin. This is my mum on the beach in Cochin. They then, of course, had to come home during the Second World War. So 1942, they had a very dangerous journey coming home with the threat that the Japanese were going to invade India. Got back to Liverpool. But what I really remember, Mum, of course, doesn't remember that much about it, given that she left when she was about 4. She does remember having to drink some horrible stuff to get rid of a tapeworm that had found a place in her gut. But it's mainly stories that my grandmother used to tell us. We used to sit on her lap and she'd tell us stories of India. And as soon as I could get traveling, that was, of course, where I wanted to go. And here you have a map of India. And when I set up Wild Frontiers, of course, I did so primarily, or to begin with, out of Pakistan, because that's where the big journey that I'd had to write my second book had kind of culminated. But as soon as 9/11 happened and we had to stop doing Pakistan, I had to kind of look elsewhere, and I obviously looked no further than the Indian subcontinent. The first trip we did to the Indian subcontinent was another former Buddhist kingdom, which was Ladakh, which is a stunning place, just right at the very, very top of India. If you look at the map of India there, you can see Srinagar, which of course is Kashmir, and then Leh next to it, which is the capital of Ladakh. And if you go all the way along the Tibetan plateau, you get to Bhutan. And while I was out doing these recce's to build these trips for the nascent Wild Frontiers, I was hearing more and more about Bhutan, this extraordinary, almost mythical land beyond the mountains where, you know, just to get in there was difficult enough with visa quotas, etc. But it was renowned for being not just a beautiful place, but a place that held onto its culture very passionately. And so again, as soon as we could, we started running trips there. And in 2003, I took my first trip, and I was lucky enough to run probably about 6 trips, I think, between 2003 and 2007. I managed to actually get my parents up there. That's my dad chivalrously riding along on his horse in front of my mum, walking along behind. I think, to be fair to Dad, Mum probably did ask to walk. She rather likes the exercise. That's going up to Eagle's Nest, which you can see behind me there on the cliff face, the famous monastery that everybody talks about, and indeed the one you can see behind my shoulder. Beautiful rhododendron forests as well. So I kind of fell in love with the place for many reasons. Obviously the landscapes, the beauty, the zongs, these incredible monasteries and centers of almost like administrative centers that each village and town has that is so spectacular. But I think the main thing that really got to me was the people, and spending time with, particularly here, I mean, this photograph was taken in the Wangdu monastery, where we spent a whole day with the novices there. And it was just a fabulous experience seeing how they lived. All families, as I recall, had to give one child, one of their sons, to the monasteries to be brought up as a monk. And it was fabulous just spending time with them and seeing how their lives were. But anyway, I am not going to steal the thunder of our main speaker, right? Even if I wanted to, I probably couldn't. So without further ado, I am going to hand over to Bradley, our main speaker. So Bradley has been writing guidebooks for 25 years. He's the co-author of more than 60 Lonely Planet guides, focusing on Central Asia and the Himalayas, including Bhutan, of course. And as well as written the Odyssey Guide to Uzbekistan and the Insight Guide on the Silk Road. He has lectured on Central Asia to the Royal Geographical Society and starred in 2 documentary series for a European TV channel, Arte, including one recreating Marco Polo's route across Asia to China. So I am going to stop sharing my screen. Bradley, if you want to come on up, we can then, there you go. Fantastic. I'll hand it over to you, Bradley.
Great. Thank you, Jonny. Thanks for that introduction and for the invitation to talk to you tonight about travel in Bhutan, 2 of my favorite subjects. Hi to everyone who's watching from home. Thank you for tuning in. Much appreciated. So I'm going to share my screen in a second and take you on a visual tour around Bhutan. I'm going to be moving at a pretty furious pace. So if there's anything that you want to know more about, if you have any questions, please do feel free to send them in, and I will do my best to answer whatever questions you can throw at me in the end of the evening. So let me just share my screen here. Hopefully you can now see my screen. So as Jonny was saying, I've been writing travel guidebooks for the last 25 years or so. I write Lonely Planet guides to Nepal, trekking in the Nepal Himalaya, Bhutan, Tibet, Northern India, Central Asia. And I've been traveling across Asia for about 3 or 4 months per year for the last quarter decade or so. And when people hear this, most people, the first question they have to ask me is, what's the best place you've ever been? If I've got one trip, where shall I go? And this, of course, is an absolutely impossible question to answer. But if I had my back against the wall and I was given one last trip to take, it would almost certainly be to Bhutan. For me, Bhutan is the most beautiful, interesting, unspoilt, inspirational, unique country that I've ever been to. And for the first 10 minutes or so, I'm just going to try and convince you of why Bhutan really is so unique. The first thing is that Bhutan is really the last remaining great Himalayan kingdom. You can see the map here of the Himalayas. Bhutan is here in the eastern section of the Himalayas. It's a tiny little country, just 600,000 people. The government managed to give a first dose of its coronavirus vaccine to the entire country in just 9 days. So it's a tiny little place. It's in quite a fragile position in many ways. If you look at some of Bhutan's regional neighbors, you have Sikkim here, just to the west, that was absorbed into India in 1975, a former Himalayan kingdom. At the other end of the Himalayas, you had the former kingdoms of Ladakh and Zanskar that were absorbed into the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And also the Kathmandu Valley, Nepal here, the kings, the royal family of Nepal were voted out of existence by the Maoist government in 2008. And also in Nepal, the former kingdom of Lomantang or Mustang was absorbed into Nepal a couple of centuries ago, and the last king of Mustang died a few years ago. And to the north in Tibet, of course, Tibet has been ruled by communist China for the last 60, 70 years. So Bhutan really is the last man standing, the last great Himalayan kingdom, and some people might even say the last Shangri-La. But it is in quite a precarious situation. On its northern border, it has 1.4 billion people of China, and on its southern border, it has almost 1.4 billion people in India. So for a tiny little country, it's in a very fragile position. And the government of Bhutan knows that the best way to safeguard its independence and to keep its culture going is to preserve this unique culture as much as it can. That's its best way to keep Bhutan alive in this increasingly globalized world. The second reason why I think Bhutan is so unique is its environment. The topography is incredibly diverse in Bhutan. Starting with the 7,500 meter peaks that you can see here at the top of the screen bordering Tibet. The landscape goes down through glacial lakes, alpine meadows, down to the middle hills of Bhutan, which is where the bulk of the population lives. This is where the capital Thimphu is, where the main airport of Perro is. And from here, the rivers just rush down through the hills and land on the Assamese plains with a big bump. Down there, it's full of steamy jungle. You'll see rhinos, tigers, wild elephants. So the range of topography in such a small country is really quite amazing. And that topography gives rise to a great range of flora and fauna. On the left, you can see here is a red panda that makes its home in eastern Nepal and the eastern Himalaya. It gets my vote as the most adorable animal that lives in the Himalaya. It's actually more of a cat than a panda bear, and it's nocturnal, so you have to be pretty lucky to spot one of these. But you have more chance of seeing one of these than you do the animal on the right. That is a snow leopard, of course. There's a few hundred of these up in the very high mountains of the Bhutanese Himalaya. Other animals you'll see, perhaps blue sheep or musk deer up in the mountains. Down in the south, there'll be wild elephants, rhinos. There's a Bengal tiger that in Bhutan has a range up to 4,200 meters in altitude, which is almost unheard of for a tropical tiger. And you'll also see black-necked cranes that arrive in Bhutan during the winter season before they head back up to the Tibetan plateau to spend summer there. One animal you'll definitely see is a takin. This is Bhutan's national animal, a very odd-looking animal with these tiny ears, strange horns, and this moose-like snout. The pelt is interesting, this kind of blonde, brown pelt. There's one conjecture that This was the golden fleece that Jason and the Argonauts went out to find on their quest across the Black Sea, that it might have been a tacking pelt that found its way across Asia somehow. Bhutan's forests are just beautiful. There are a lot of old growth forests, wonderful trees, deodar trees, cheer pine trees, hemlock, and these tree-sized rhododendrons that you can see here. The Eastern Himalaya is much lusher and wetter than the West, so it has a much greater biodiversity. If you come to Bhutan in springtime, in March and April, you'll see entire hillsides covered in beautiful rhododendron blooms. There's 46 types of rhododendrons in Bhutan, and in the spring you can see all kinds of different colors blooming at different times, at different altitudes, and it's really quite remarkable. There's also 600 types of orchids. If there's any keen gardeners amongst you, you'll probably already know that most of England's azaleas and rhododendrons actually came from the Eastern Himalaya and were brought back by the Victorian plant hunters in the 19th century. Bhutan's environmental record is really quite impressive. The government mandates that at least 60% of the country must be covered in forest, and at the moment it stands at about 71%. So it's one of those rare environmental targets that is not only met, but exceeded. Bhutan was the first country to be carbon neutral, and it's now the only country that is actually carbon positive. The forests of Bhutan take in more carbon dioxide than the country emits. And about just under half of the country is protected in national parks and wildlife sanctuaries at the moment. This is the kind of tree you can expect in Bhutan. This is, I think, the oldest tree in Bhutan. It's a 2,000-year-old cypress tree, gives you an idea of the scale of these forests. And that's my guide rather reluctantly posing for scale. The other reason Bhutan is unique is its concept of gross national happiness. It's become a bit of a marketing slogan in the last few years, but at its heart, it's really the idea that economics are not the only metric of development, that environmental issues, that clean air, clean water, the social life of a community, the religious life, the good governance, that these are all things that are just as important as a purely economic factor when you're deciding on whether to have a hydroelectric dam or a new industry, something like that. It's the idea that gross national happiness is as important as gross domestic product, that capitalism is no more important than compassion, for example. One of the main points about gross national happiness is Bhutan's unique tourism model. It goes for a high value, low volume model of tourism. So it wants the economic benefits from tourism, but it doesn't want the negative side effects that often come with tourism. So Bhutan is famously one of the most expensive countries in the world to visit. You have to pay a minimum of between 250 and 290 US dollars per person per day. And that's at the very basic level. If you're going with a Western tour company, with a foreign tour guide, with other activities, it's going to go up from there. But what most people don't realize is that that's not a fee to enter the country. That's actually your tour cost. So that includes good accommodation, 3-star accommodation, includes your transport. If you're in a small group or a family, you'll have your own SUV and driver. It includes your guide who'll come with you everywhere. It includes your food, all entry. So it's actually not that bad a deal. It's comparable to a high-end tour in Tibet or Nepal, I think. And you know that out of that money, 65 US dollars goes into a social fund that's used for social welfare and education in Bhutan, so that you're contributing directly to the development of the country that you're traveling through. Here you can see a guide is pointing out the wheel of life in a monastery to a couple of visitors. The other unique thing about Bhutan is its very strong traditional culture. And one of the most obvious ways you can see that is in the national dress. You'll hardly see anybody wearing modern Western clothes in Bhutan, certainly not outside of Thimphu. It's actually a legal requirement that you have to wear traditional formal dress if you visit a government office. We have an audience with a government minister. And the national dress for men involves this robe called a go. It's belted around the waist with a woolen belt. And for the women, it's this dress or wraparound skirt called a kira, and then a silk jacket on top. The embroidery and the weaving in Bhutan is really spectacular. So if you have an interest in textiles, Eastern Bhutan is definitely the place you should head for. And you can see the men here have a white scarf over their left shoulder. This is called a Rabbini. And this is to denote social rank. If you're a member of the royal family or a government minister or part of the monastic body, you have different colored scarves that you're allowed to wear. So Bhutan is a very stratified hierarchical society. So it's a visual clue as to where you stand in that society. And the men wear these kind of knee-length socks, and also on special occasions, these beautiful traditional Bhutanese boots. This is almost the last place in the Himalaya where you can regularly see men wearing traditional Tibetan boots like this. They're actually based on a Mongolian design with these upturned toes. Bhutanese architecture is another really unique draw. Almost everywhere in the country has traditional architecture with whitewashed stone and with carved and painted wood. It's an architecture that really blends in harmoniously with the landscape and shapes the face of Bhutan. Here you can see a cantilevered bridge, and the two buildings behind it are temples. And the reason you know it's a temple because it has this brown band just below the roof with those white discs in it. The main architectural feature in Bhutan is a dzong, which means a fortress. These were built in the 15th, 16th century when Bhutan was defending itself against Tibetan invaders. So they still look like fortresses. The one on the left is Perro dzong, and the central building, the tower that you can see there is called an utse, and it's full of relics, shrines and chapels. Most of the dzongs are divided into two courtyards. One is the government bureaucracy. It's where you'll go to get a permit or a stamp. And the other one is for the monastic body. So it's full of monks, prayer halls, chanting, that kind of thing. It's a symbol that in Bhutan, the church and state are unified in the government. It's not a separation like you find in many Western countries. And on the right, you've got Trungsa dzong here. You can get a sense of how difficult it would have been to try and get into one of these if you're the Tibetan army in the 16th century. You'll see stupas everywhere in Bhutan, some the size that can fit into your palm, some are multi-story building size stupas that you can go into, and you wander around all the different chapels inside, and you walk around clockwise and go up through the various levels until you appear at the top. Pilgrims in Bhutan will also always keep the stupas on their right-hand side. They'll always walk clockwise around the stupa, which is called a chertan in the Tibetan world. And you can see the two Bhutanese here have prayer beads in their left hand. There's a couple of types of stupa that you can see here. On the left is a bell shape stupa, and the other one is a more traditional Tibetan style. Prayer flags are everywhere in Bhutan. They're slightly different from where the prayer flags you'll see elsewhere in the Himalaya, in places in Tibet and the higher parts of Nepal. They just don't have the forest. They don't have, wood is too scarce to create prayer flags like this, but Bhutan has plenty of wooden forest. So on these white prayer flags, you'll see prayers and mantras printed, as well as an image of the wind horse. And when the wind blows, the wind horse is said to take the prayers and spread them out on the wind. Prayer wheels all across Bhutan. Some are hand powered like this one. Some are powered by stream. Some are wind powered. And some very small ones just sit above a candle, and the hot air just slowly turns them round and round. Prayer wheels are really the center of the Bhutanese community. So people from the village will come and sit down here. They'll get both a physical and a spiritual workout as they turn the prayer wheels. They'll gain merit for themselves, and they'll sit down with the other people in the village and chat and get the local gossip, the news, have a good joke. It's one of the things that really binds Bhutanese villages together. Archery is the national sport in Bhutan. You'll be able to see it if you go through Thimphu or Perro. What I love about archery matches is that while the archer is trying to to make his aim. The opposition will be telling dirty jokes and generally trying to put off the opposition as much as possible. And when the archer scores a bullseye, he will do a nice little dance and sing a song and generally rub it in the face of the opposition. So they're great fun. If you get a chance to watch one of these competitions, it's well worth doing. The arts and crafts are very strong in Bhutan. The government has a series of schools to promote what is called the Zorig Chosum, the 13 Arts of Bhutan. This is a man drawing a tanka, or a religious painting. You can, if you look carefully, you can see the grids, the grid markings behind the picture. These religious paintings are drawn to very specific scale and proportion. The perspectives are all written down by rules and grids. The colors are predetermined. There's not much artistic expression available here to an artist. It's more of a religious activity. But you can go and see school for Zorig Chosum, the 13 arts in Thimphu, walk around the different classrooms, see people learning how to make statues, how to do the wood carving. It's very interesting to see, and it makes for some great photos as well. This is a metal casting workshop. This is the tiny little finger of a Buddha statue. So you can imagine what size this statue is going to end up being. There's several gigantic statues around Bhutan, 150, 200 feet tall. So what is there to see for tourists coming to Bhutan? The first thing is the architecture. I mean, the traditional architecture is beautiful. This is Punakha Dzong with the flowering lilac jacaranda trees at the bottom. It's probably the most beautiful dzong in Bhutan. But there are also other monasteries, there are hermitages, there are nunneries, there are small shrines and temples. They're all beautiful, and they all really create this traditional face of Bhutan as you travel around it. The mountain scenery, the trekking is great in Bhutan. It doesn't quite have the big mountains that Nepal has, but it also has a lot fewer trekkers. There aren't really many porters in Bhutan. It's mostly just horse and yak that carry your gear. You can see the traditional bamboo boxes that are here on the horses that carry all of your gear. The treks last for anything from 2 days to 3.5 weeks to do the Snowman Trek, which is often quoted as the most difficult trek in the world. Apparently more people have summited Mount Everest than have completed the Snowman Trek. But the quality of the guides and trekking is really superb in Bhutan. It's everything as good as you'll find in Nepal, if not slightly more reliable. Traditional life in Bhutan is a real draw. Most villages look like this with traditional architecture. You can see the haystacks full of pine needles in the front for the livestock during the winter. And most villages have a temple that you can see behind there with that characteristic brown band. There's very few concrete buildings in Bhutan. There's no advertising billboards. There's very little globalization. There's no global brands. There's no McDonald's or Starbucks. So in a lot of villages will look like this. And the only way you can really tell that this shop belongs to the 20th or 21st centuries is the electricity line here. Apart from that, life is still lived very traditionally. For me, a great draw in Bhutan is the way the Bhutanese see their landscape. They see a world that is full of spirits, protectors, demons, saints. They see this supernatural world overlaid on top of the natural world. They see their landscape as a sacred landscape. And you can see here a family is having a picnic by a spring, and behind them is this huge painted rock carving of Guru Rinpoche, or Padmasambhava in Sanskrit, who is the 8th century tantric master who is said to have brought Buddhism to the Himalaya and to Tibet. This is a Naga spirit. The Nagas live in pools of water, so lakes, wells, ponds. And the last thing you want to do is upset the Naga spirits. So the Bhutanese are very good at not polluting water sources. it's a great example of how folk religion and common sense can come together to create a good environment for a village. This is a snow lion, not a snow leopard. Snow leopard is a real animal. Snow lion is a mythological animal. Bhutanese have many mythological animals. They believe in the Migoi, which is the Yeti, and there's actually a wildlife sanctuary in the far east of Bhutan that was at least partially set up in order to preserve potential Yeti habitat. This is a Zo, or a spirit trap. The multicolored threads create this three-dimensional mandala shape that trap the evil spirits that are in your village. And after a few weeks, the monks will take this out to the edge of town, dispose of it, get rid of the evil spirits that have been causing havoc in the village. One of my favorite things to do in Bhutan is to follow pilgrims on a Kora path, or a pilgrim path around a sacred site. This is a place called Drak Kapo, which is just 45 minutes from the Perro Thimphu main road, but hardly any tour groups come here. They all go headed straight for Thimphu. I've never seen another foreigner up here, but it's a really amazing place, one where you can join in with a pilgrim path. Most pilgrim sites are all based around a relic. This is what the Bhutanese called a rangzen, or self-arising, a naturally arising image in a stone. This is not carved onto the stone. This has just miraculously appeared. It's the footprint of a holy lama. So pilgrims will line up, they'll touch their head on this sacred stone, and then the caretaker will pick it up and place it on different parts of their body so they get a blessing if they've got a bad back or bad knee or something like that. This was one of my favorite afternoons I've had in Drak Kapo. On the left-hand side, the man in the middle is the caretaker, and he's showing me around the site with all the sacred rocks and symbols that are there. He's showing me here that that mark in the rock was carved out by a huge Garuda, mythological bird, with his claws just made this pattern in the rock. On the right there, my guide is getting some relief from his back pain by rubbing it on a sacred rock. On the left here is what's called a sin test. You squeeze your way through these little passageways, and if you can get through all the way to the other end, then you apparently have good karma. And if you can't get through and come back, then you have to make some adjustments in your lifestyle. You can see on the left of the entryway there, a little green face of a demon guarding the entryway to the passage. And when you go around with pilgrims in Drak Kapo, at one point, we all just descend down this metal staircase into this cave. Feels like entering the underworld. It's full of sacred places where lamas would have done solo meditation. And you squeeze your way through this little underground limestone passageway. It's complete pitch black. So the only way I could ever see where I was going was I gave my camera to the guy in front of me, and he would keep taking flash photographs, and I'd be able to see where I was going for a second or two. And then eventually you pop out in this little hole above the main shrine. And the thing I love about this is joining a pilgrimage is it allows you to break down the barriers between a tourist and the local people. You're no longer just an observer in this. You're an active participant in the pilgrimage. You're very much seeing and experiencing the sites from the perspective of a Bhutanese pilgrim. And that is really what I love about these pilgrimage sites. I thoroughly recommend going to one if you're able to fit it in. So festivals are a major draw, of course, for all visitors going to Bhutan. Every major dzong or village has at least one annual festival. They're extremely colorful. This is a cham dance where the monks dress up in very colorful gear and masks and do a dance that sanctifies the place and also kind of renews Buddhism for the year ahead in the village. The masks and the costumes are incredibly colorful. On the right, you can see these paper mache masks that's representing Guru Rinpoche again, and a high Bhutanese Lama on the left with the red hat. Some of the dances are Buddhist parables, some are teachings, some are historical reenactments. The best thing about the festivals are the crowds. Everyone's come from all the villages around the festival site. They're all dressed in their Sunday best. and they are absolutely awestruck at what they're seeing. We use this word awesome much too loosely in the West, but the participants and the spectators in one of these festivals, they really have a sense of awe at what they're seeing. But they're also here to have fun. It's a way to meet people from the villages that they only see once a year. It's a way to get a bit of shopping done. They catch up on the news and the gossip. They might try and find a match for their son or daughter, and all the teenagers will be flirting outrageously with the other teenagers, a rare chance to get to know more people from outside the village. You can often get behind the scenes in a festival. This is a man's having his skeleton mask just adjusted before he goes out to dance. He's got these scary kind of hand gloves, and the man on the left is just waiting to get his mask put on. And then 1 minute later, they're out in the festival ground doing this very spooky possession dance. There's a lot of evil spirits, skeletons, and exorcism in these festivals, which makes it really fascinating. Most tour groups see the big festivals in Perro, Thimphu, and Punakha, as it coincides with a high season and the best season to go trekking. But if you get a chance to see a lesser visited festival in another part of the country, I really recommend it. This is Chotun Kora in the far east of Bhutan, where they unfurl this building-sized tanka called a tundrol. Everyone queues up to get a blessing by touching their forehead at the bottom of the tanka. This once again is Guru Rinpoche, who I mentioned before. The mood at these festivals is very much like a fair. This is an itinerant holy man who's brought in this incredible three-dimensional stupa that almost unfurls to show all kinds of images, relics, little caskets. For me, this is a great symbol of how medieval Bhutan is in many ways. For me, it's straight out of something like Chaucer, and the devotion that the pilgrims show when they're presented with these this kind of relic is really amazing. Festivals are a great way to see people from across the country as well. Here on the left, the lady is from Laya, she's a Layap, and they have this lovely little woven bamboo conical hat that they wear on their heads. Very remote area just on the border with Tibet. And on the right, this is a Brokpa from the far east of Bhutan. These remarkable yak felt hats and tunics. These kind of dreadlock things you see coming off the hat are actually act as water spouts when it rains to stop the water going on the face of the Brokpa. So they're really quite ingenious. The tourist experience in Bhutan, you'll get very nice, comfortable hotels. This hotel on the left is probably slightly nicer than you'll get most of the time, mostly because of the open plan bathroom and bathtub. But this kind of sleek wooden finish in the space, that's very common for a Bhutanese hotel room. They all have Wi-Fi, they're all very comfortable. The hotel on the right is called the Jiwaling in Perro. It's built in traditional Bhutanese style with very ornate carved and painted woodwork. It's got its own chapel, its own shrines. It's quite a lovely place to stay. If you want some luxury, the sky's the limit in Bhutan, really. Bhutan is known as Nepal for the jet set. This is the place where Silicon Valley CEOs and Hollywood celebrities come and have their holidays. This is the Amankora chain of resorts run by Aman. This doesn't come cheap, I'm afraid. This will cost you about $2,000 a night, but they are lovely, exclusive places to stay. The open plan bathrooms are particularly lovely. You can see on the right in this picture that kind of black stove. It's called a bukari, and most hotel rooms in Bhutan will have one of these. A member of staff will come in the afternoon, light the fire, and then the river stones above it will absorb all the heat and then radiate that out. So it's lovely and cozy when you come back at the end of the day, especially if it's during winter or at higher altitudes. This is the Uma Hotel in Perro, another 5-star hotel. The restaurant here is great. You can make a reservation even if you're not staying here and eat there. It's one of the best restaurants in Bhutan. But if you have a special occasion, perhaps a wedding anniversary, a honeymoon, a wedding proposal, you can have what they call private dining here. So this is your own private dining room in the traditional courtyard of the hotel. Again, it doesn't come cheap, but if you have a special occasion lined up, it makes for an absolutely unforgettable evening. Food in Bhutan is spicy. You'll soon realize that red chilies in Bhutan are not a condiment. They are actually the main course. The national dish, emedatse, is red chilies and cheese, and it is incredibly spicy. Most of the food you'll get will be probably in hotel buffets, so the spice will be toned down for that. Don't worry if you don't like spicy food. But if you do like spicy food, I recommend you go, if you're in a smaller hotel, follow your guide into the back of the kitchen and try some of the emedatse there. It will blow the roof off of your head, I guarantee it. The green vegetables you see here are called nake. They're fiddlehead ferns, my favorite food in Bhutan. You fry them up with butter or put them in a dish with the datse cheese. You'll see those in springtime. So if you're there in March and April, always ask for some nake. Bhutanese do fabulous picnics. If you're on a day hike or if you're in the middle of nowhere driving between two towns, you'll pull over in a lovely spot and your guide will bring out these 4 or 5 metal canisters full of hot food that the hotel cooked up in the morning. You'll get plates out, knives and forks, and you have this 5-star picnic with a flask of hot tea in a beautiful situation in the middle of nowhere. They do a really good job with this kind of packed lunch. And you will not rough it if you go on a trek. This is a trek between Perro and Thimphu, a 4 or 5 day trek. I did this trek for Lonely Planet, so I was by myself, just one person, but I had 2 guides, several camp staff, pony men, 9 ponies to carry all of my stuff and the equipment, including this table, which was for breakfast. A classic breakfast on a trek will be what you can see here: cornflakes, toast, sausages, bacon, jam, coffee, and best of all, French fries for breakfast. Bhutan is full of the unexpected. You might be watching a Bhutanese astrologer giving a divination to choose a name for a newly born baby, for example, in a medieval monastery. And he could just well stop halfway through it and take a FaceTime call on his iPhone. These kind of unexpected things happen all the time. It doesn't take long in Bhutan to realize that there's not a single traffic light in the entire country. And one of the other things you probably weren't expecting was the 3 craft microbreweries that are now in Bhutan. You can go to one of these, get a flight, try all the different beers, and be one of the rare people who have tried a Bhutanese IPA. And it's very good, I have to say. The flight to Bhutan is not a slog to get over and done with. Like most destinations, it's a highlight in itself, especially if you're flying from Kathmandu to Perro. You're flying along the whole spine of the Himalaya, past Everest, Makalu, Kanchenjunga, Jomalhari. Really spectacular views. So try and get a window seat and be on the right side of the plane or the left side, depending on which direction you're flying from. The colors here are of Druk Air, the national airline, and the dragon you can see there is a Druk, or a thunder dragon. The Bhutanese call their country Drukyul, or the land of the thunder dragon. And the school of Tibetan Buddhism that they follow is called the Drukpa school. So I'm going to finish off with just a look at the most famous site in Bhutan, the Taksang, or the Tiger's Nest, and how you could maybe see a really famous site in a slightly different way. So Jonny talked about visiting Taksang Monastery. It's up there on the top of the cliff, clinging on by its fingertips onto the edge of the rock face. And most people, like Jonny's parents, walk up on a 2-hour walk or take a pony half the way there. You'll be surrounded by lots of other tour groups and probably a lot of Indian tourists who are headed up there. It's still wonderful, still an incredible experience, but you won't have it to yourself. What I like to do is to start further down the valley and take a side road that goes up to a Buddhist college on the top of the hillside. And from there you start hiking, and it's a half-day hike past prayer flags up to this beautiful high plateau with these conical hills behind it. Great views from the prayer flags, and then you drop down to this fixed camp. This is not a rough a night roughing it, you'll have a proper wooden bed frame, a proper full-size hotel mattress, a heated dining room, and you spend the night with these wonderful views, see a classic Himalayan sunset. And then the next day, just 100 meters away, is this lovely little meditation shrine. It's like a little miniature version of the Taksang tiger's nest. And you'll have that place to yourself. And then you start walking down a hill through rhododendron forest, passing 4 or 5 lovely little temples that kind of grow organically out of the rock, out of cliffs and clefts in the rock. And eventually you come down to just above Taksang. So most people are climbing up from here. They're following the hillside around and visiting the tiger's nest. But you're seeing it from a completely different perspective, one that you have completely to yourself. So in one 24-hour period, you've tried trekking, you've been up in the mountains, you've had a night under a Himalayan sky, you've been to your own version of the tiger's nest, and then you've seen a load of shrines coming down in a form of pilgrimage in a way. So it's a great alternative way to see Bhutan's #1 site. So that's about it. I'm going to leave you here with an image of Punakha Dzong. I would just say to leave you that if you have a vague interest in Bhutan, if you have an inkling that this is a place you want to go to, if you've been to Tibet or Nepal, then definitely give it a go. For me, it's a country that shows you a different way of seeing the world, a different set of priorities, and how you should live your life, what's important. And for me, that's the very best kind of travel. So that's it for me. I'll hand you back to Jonny and Marc. But if you do have any questions, please send them in, and I'll do my best to answer them later on. Over to you, Jonny.
Bradley, thank you so much. That was really, really fascinating, and has completely taken me back to some of my trips and reminded me of so many things, particularly the green chilies, where I've had to stop so many tourists from diving in thinking they're runner beans in nice white sauce. There are plenty of questions coming in, Bradley. We're going to crack straight on though. So I'm going to hand over to Marc now. Those of you watching, I'm sure many of you will know Marc. He's a director of operations and product at Wild Frontiers. He's going to talk us through now one of our group tours, so that you've got a sense of kind of what type of things we do on the group tours. Marc, over to you.
Jonny, thank you. Bradley, amazing. I first went to Bhutan in 2003. And I think, like Jonny and Bradley, it got me. It is one of those destinations. I'd been to the Indian Himalaya before, I'd been to Nepal Himalaya, but there was something incredibly special about Bhutan that stuck with me. But I only had about a week there. So I focused predominantly on Perro, on Thimphu and Punakha, and I loved it. But I felt that I'd never really had the chance to get beneath the surface or to see a greater variety of the country. So when it came around to my turn to design a trip to Wild Frontiers, I wanted to design a trip that ensured our clients saw more of the country physically than I had, but also got to see a greater variety than just the kind of the main tourist hubs. So the result of that is this trip, the 13-day Land of the Thunder Dragon trip. As you can see, it does go to Perro, Thimphu and Punakha, which is where I went back in 2003. But you'll see also that it heads further east from there out towards Gangte, which sits in the Phobishka Valley, and then further east still out to central Bhutan around Bumtang, Tang Valley, Chokor Valley. And that's where we spend 4 nights to really give people time to explore on foot some of the lesser known sites, some of the villages as well, to really just try and get that balance right. And I'm sure most of you that have traveled well will know that however amazing the church is, the mosque is, the temple is, you can get too much of a good thing. And I think if you're not careful, you can do that a little bit in Bhutan. So I think it's really good just to bear that in mind, just to try and get a balance as you're traveling, to make sure that you're not just focused purely on the main architectural sites. So just to try and take you through some of what you'll see on this trip. So you will start in Perro. Now, Perro is the only international airport in the country. And I have to say, it is the most relaxed and definitely one of the loveliest international airports I've ever been to. And if you look at the runway here, I remember driving along the runway and my guide saying, This is the only piece of straight road in the entire country. And you soon come to believe it, because the country, as Bradley was saying, is incredibly mountainous. And so every journey becomes beautiful in itself. From here, we drive about 50 kilometers to the capital, Thimphu. Now, Thimphu is not a huge metropolis. It's got a population of about 115,000. To put that into perspective, that's about the same size as Cambridge here inside the UK. And as Bradley was saying, one of the things that Bhutan is known for is not having a single traffic light in the entire country. But they experimented here, one of the central crossroads in Thimphu. They put in a traffic light a couple of decades ago. It lasted 24 hours. People didn't like it. They just said it was too impersonal. So they've gone back to having this more traditional style of direction with a policeman directing traffic all over the place. And during our time in the capital, Thimphu, we'll go up to the National Memorial Chorten, which is a real place of pilgrimage, especially for older Bhutanese. So we'll visit that. We'll also visit the Trashi Chodzong, which is the spiritual and the governmental heart of the city, with a very, very complex history dating back over 800 years. You'll get a chance to see the takin, the very odd national animal. And there's a lovely story here. Apparently there was a mini zoo that was built here, and the King of Bhutan said, no, zoos is not a very Buddhist thing. We shouldn't be enclosing animals. So they disbanded the zoo and said to the takin, you can go. But the takin are quite docile, so they just stuck around. So now it's just become a reserve for the takin that you can go and see on the outskirts of the city. And you'll definitely have opportunities to see archery, and whether it be the traditional bamboo bow or the more state-of-the-art carbonite, you'll still see how popular and how important datse or archery is to the Bhutanese. From there, we start to head further east, going over the Dochu La, 3,140 meters, start to see some of the beautiful scenery. And what we'll often do is, the roads are not busy. Often we'll stop the bus, people get out, they'll wander for a bit, sometimes along the road, sometimes through village paths, down through fields, down through forests. The bus will drive on and pick people up half an hour further down. And it's just a really nice, gentle way, hassle-free way of traveling through the country. So it doesn't feel like an arduous task as you travel through the mountain roads. And our port of call for that evening is Gangte, where there's a monastery dating back to 1613. And this is where, if you come between October and February, you will see the black-necked cranes. It's a glacial valley that you have here. And the black-necked cranes symbol the start of the harvest. There's less than 10,000 in the entire world. They are endangered, and they have apparently a very elaborate mating ritual, which I won't try and reenact for you now, you'll be pleased to know. But if you're into that, October to February is the time to see them when they come over from Tibet. And this is the first opportunity where we actually go for a walk in the valley through some of the villages and just meeting the people kind of Bhutan. And it's also a good opportunity to see the flying phalluses of Bhutan. Now, this is not crude graffiti. This is a respectable home that is decorated with phalluses. This tradition dates back to the 15th, 16th century, where a wandering Lama from Tibet by the name of Drukpa Kunle, who has the nickname the Divine Madman, used rather outrageous ways of teaching. He was apparently a drunkard, a Lothario, but he used his very unique way of teaching Buddhism as he traveled through. Yeah, this is one of the oddest and most memorable sights that you will see as you travel through Bhutan. So moving swiftly on, we will come into the more central region, which is the Tang Valleys, Chokor and Tang. And here we have an opportunity to see some of the much sought after weaving that Bradley mentioned. This is called Yathra Weaving. And traditionally they used hand-spun, hand-woven woolen strips to create shawls and rugs made with these quite incredible geometric patterns. Nowadays, they'll make bags, they'll make short jackets. So the women of a village here in Bhutan called Shume, they start from as young as 8 learning this. It's a source of great pride. And obviously there are retail opportunities when you're here, but these are globally sought after products. So it's quite an amazing thing to go and see them being made at source. And then we're here for 4 nights. We spend 2 nights in a hotel, 2 nights homestay. And this is really where there are opportunities just to get out and go for walks. And you can, to some extent, we can adapt the walks and you can be as active or as inactive as you want. And this isn't the Snowman Trek. This isn't high Himalayan mountaineering, but equally it is Bhutan. So it's not a kind of just a wander through, along the beach. You are going up and down hills, so you do need a modicum or a moderate amount of fitness. But it is incredible just to have this time to explore the different valleys of Bhutan. You'll have a chance to see some of the lesser known monasteries and nunneries, see some of the little towns and villages, cross some exciting suspension bridges, and perhaps even in the higher pastures, get to see some of the yak farming. And even if you don't, and even if you just hang around the places where we're staying, there's just opportunities just to see Bhutanese in their normal walks of life, going to school, going to work, doing their handicrafts, along their pilgrimages. And it's really nice. And it was something which I didn't really have during my fairly rushed first week there back in 2003, just to really experience what Bhutan really is like. As we start to come back towards the west, we'll make different stops. So we will stop at Punakha, which really is this incredible dzong. It's a former capital dating back to 1637, and being lower down, it's in a lower valley, only at about 1200. You'll see different vegetation there, different things growing. So we'll go for a walk there as well. And we will come back to Perro, go beyond the airport. You'll see again the wonderful dzong. You will get to see the main kind of tourist sites there, which are definitely worthwhile. And you will get a chance to go up to the famed Tiger's Nest as well. And with regards to the accommodation, yes, we are staying, as you can see, in the types of accommodation, not the Aman on the group tour, but definitely really nice, characterful accommodation, quite simple, but very nice. And we will spend, and this is something quite different, we will spend a couple of nights, and quite rare, I would say, to be able to spend a couple of nights in a homestay. It's very friendly. It is a little bit more basic. Sometimes there are shared facilities, but it's an incredible experience to have that, to get real home cooked food, and also to have the chance, as you can see here, to have a traditional stone bath as well, which is something very, very special. Most of our departures do try and coincide with one of the festivals, sometimes in Punakha, sometimes in one of the lesser visited dzongs over in Bumtang. And if you can coordinate with them, they are pretty amazing. And yes, you will get the chance to enjoy the emedatse, which I loved, the Chilean cheese. It will go with you, and you will remember. I remember it almost 20 years on. It's fantastic. And as Bradley was saying, we'll stop for picnics en route. And I remember the colours of the temples, the colours of the dzongs, and they are incredible. And I just remember a really friendly, peaceful people. It really is. There is a sense of just being in Bhutan, that it doesn't really matter exactly what you're doing on any particular day. There really is a feeling that pervades the entire country with the people there. That is something which I think everyone that's been to Bhutan really remembers. From a practical point of view, you do need a visa to go to Bhutan, and that needs to be arranged in advance. It's fairly simple. We need a passport scan. We need to know how you're arriving. We'll apply through our partners. They'll apply through the Ministry of Tourism, and you'll get issued with an e-visa, which you'll need in order to get on your plane. And one of the things I really like about the visa is on the back side of it, they give you a whole list of do's and don'ts. And I don't really know any other country that does that. Yeah, you can find it in guidebooks like The Lonely Planet. You'll find it, in kind of culture shock guides. But I don't really know any other country that actually tells you in their visa, these are the things that we expect you to do and not to do. And some of it's just common sense, but I love it. Be sensitive when you're taking photographs, and always ask. Always be in proper dress code while visiting sacred sites. And yeah, don't urinate along the roadside. It just, I think, shows that pride that Bhutan has in itself and in the behavior that it expects of its visitors. Now, obviously, I've been talking about the group tour, which has a maximum group size of 12. They run a few times a year. If you don't like the itinerary, or if the dates don't suit, or if you want to treat yourself to some of the higher level accommodation, then you'll want to be speaking to Shamali. Shamali is our Indian subcontinent specialist, and she would be joining us today, but she's visiting family in India, and we thought it was a bit mean at 12:30 at night to get her in on the webinar. So she's around, she's working UK hours, and she'll be available to talk you through all options and to be able to arrange any of those incredible hotels that I would love to stay in one of these days, and yet I've never had the opportunity to. If you can coincide with the festivals, there are loads of them. They are generally released about 15 months ahead of schedule. As you can see, there's about 40 of them throughout the year, all in different places. But if you can try and coincide, Shamali can help you arrange that. And as Bradley was saying, a lot of almost the entire population of Bhutan, in fact, rumors are that the entire population now is fully vaccinated. Bhutan hasn't opened up to tourism just yet again. It's biding its time. It's seeing how things are going to go in India and Nepal. But the rumors that we're hearing is that by the spring, it will be open. Now, we have a departure going in March. We're keeping an eye on it. And hopefully we'll know in the next few weeks. But hopefully by the spring, Bhutan should be open again to tourism. Now, just to finish off, it's worth noting there are no direct flights from either Europe or from the Americas into Bhutan. So this gives you the opportunity to explore a place en route. Now, you can either just do a stopover if time is of the essence, or if you're very well traveled in the region. But if you haven't, it's a really great opportunity to go and explore one of the neighboring countries. And these are just three of the most popular kind of hubs for accessing Bhutan. There's Nepal with Kathmandu, which is a fantastic place. You can go to nearby Chitwan National Park, go over to Pokhara Lake, and if you've got the time and inclination, you can obviously do a major trek up in the Annapurna or the high Himalayas. Kolkata is a very popular hub as well, and if you speak to Jonny, he will tell you that it is his favorite large Indian city. And the great thing with Kolkata is, although you can fly from Kolkata to Perro in just 80 minutes, you can actually go overland through West Bengal, going up through Darjeeling, even perhaps staying at one of the tea plantations, like the Glenburn Tea Estate, and enter Bhutan overland. So that's quite a nice special way of entering the country. And finally, especially if you've never been to India before, you can actually fly from Delhi to Perro in 2 hours. So you can explore the Indian capital, go to nearby Agra to see the Taj Mahal, go to Ranthambore to see tigers, and go and explore Jaipur, the Pink City, and the Rajasthan capital as well, all within easy access of Delhi. More information can be found from contacting us, Shamali, or have a look on our website and find out hopefully everything that you need. Back to you, Jonny.
Great, Marc, thank you very much. Right, we have run over slightly, but I'm just going to quickly share my screen again, and then we can get on to some questions very quickly. So yeah, just a little bit of housekeeping again. If you are interested in traveling to any of our destinations, do please, we're offering now kind of Zoom consultation, so you can talk to any one of our travel specialists through a Zoom consultation. Don't forget the Wild Frontiers Foundation. In normal times, we'd be doing a lot of these presentations in person, and part of the fee for the night would go to the foundation. We don't get that anymore, obviously. So we ask that you, if you've enjoyed tonight's presentation, then it would be great, however small a donation, to the Wild Frontiers Foundation. We do an awful lot. We built this school in Pakistan. We've done various COVID appeals and all sorts of projects we get involved in. So that's the Wild Frontiers Foundation. Now, without wanting to kind of cry wolf too many times, the next webinar will be on the 19th of January at 6 o'clock, same time. It'll be myself and Kate Humble. We're going to talk about all things Indian. We're going to move south of Bhutan and talk about India from the major sites through to off the beaten track. So that should be fun. Join myself and Kate for that on the 19th of January. That's on the website now, so you can register for that. We're still running a reduced deposit for the group tours, so £200 or $250, 20% for tailor-made adventures. And we still have our COVID promise. So if a trip isn't viable, you get a refund or the ability to rebook your trip for another date. And as Marc was saying, the group tours, the maximum group size 12, tour leaders and local guides, interesting and comfortable accommodation and transport, full board, so almost all meals are included, and COVID health and safety policy and protocols. And the tailor-made, we have a full team of travel specialists, expert knowledge in their areas, and of course we are atoll protected. So, right, Q&As. I am going to stop sharing my screen and go back. Bradley, if you want to turn your camera back on again, and we can answer some questions. Now, there's been quite a lot of good questions that have come in, a lot about altitude, and it is quite an interesting one because, Bradley, you're probably the best person to answer this. People have asked specifically about the altitude when you stay the night on that lovely back road trek into Tiger's Nest. But it's interesting because, of course, a lot of the places you're staying, from how I remember it, are kind of somewhere between 2,500 meters, some even lower, as you say, Marc, in Punakha. But you do drive over very high passes, sometimes as much as 4,000 meters before dropping down again. So it is quite varied. I'm talking more from a kind of cultural tour than a trekking tour, but perhaps you want to just answer a couple of questions on that, Bradley.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's definitely true. Most of the places you'll be staying in will be about 2,000, 2,500 meters. The passes go up to about 3,700 perhaps meters. So altitude isn't really a problem for most cultural tours at all. You normally end up visiting the Tiger's Nest at the end of a trip when you're a little bit more acclimatized, when you've got over the drag of the flight. The trek that I was talking about, that goes a little bit higher. The Tiger's Nest is about, I think, about 3,200 meters, something like that. And the trek goes up to about 3,900 meters. So you spend the night about 3,900, and then you drop down to the Tiger's Nest. So if you're going to do that, you want to do that at the end of your trip when you're a little bit more acclimatized. But if you're not trekking, there's not really anywhere that you'll stay in Bhutan that puts you at any risk of altitude sickness. You shouldn't really feel it at all. You're only going to be on the passes for 10-15 minutes to take a photograph and see the views of the Himalaya.
Yeah, that's certainly my experience. The groups that I've taken through Bhutan we've never had anybody with any serious altitude sickness. Another question here, again, I suspect most of the questions might be going to you, Bradley, but it's a good question, and it's about conversing with people in the more rural parts in terms of language. How much English is spoken, and is it necessary to converse more through your guide than through expecting local people to speak English?
Well, Bhutanese speak very good English, like they do in India. It's a language that they learn in school. So in any of the towns, you'll always find people that speak probably better English than I do, to be honest. So that's not a problem. If you go to really remote rural areas, if you go out to the Far East, then yes, there are probably people that only speak Dzongkha, the Bhutanese language, or in the East, Sha Chop, which is a completely different language. But that's why you have a guide. That's a great thing about having a guide in Bhutan. You can talk to anyone. You can ask about what's daily life in Bhutan like. Your guide is there actually able to present these things to you. So I've never had a problem with communication at all in Bhutan. Bhutanese are very switched on, although you think of it as this great Shangri-La. They're well connected to the world. They're very well educated, very smart and switched on. So communication has never been a problem. Yeah, no, absolutely. That's my experience. A couple of questions here I can answer very quickly. Marnie, the best time to see the rhododendrons is March, April. That's absolute. That's when they're in full bloom. Temperature variations. Again, guys, jump in here. My experience of Bhutan is that the best times to visit are generally kind of the autumn and the springs as regards our climate. So probably October, November are great times to visit, as are March, April. When you're getting into the summer, you kind of run the risk of slight monsoon weather. But also Christmas can be a great time to go as well, where the Himalayas are completely clear. It's colder, obviously, but it's very lovely, crisp, clear air. Bradley, I've never traveled there during the summer months. Have you? And what would your experience be of that? I haven't traveled during the summer. Summer is essentially the Indian monsoon, so it's quite a deluge. You don't want to go trekking. There's leeches everywhere. there's a stronger chance that there'll be some disruption to the roads. There are sometimes landslides, sometimes roads are closed for a day or two. So it's not, I wouldn't say it's the best time to go to Bhutan. It is slightly cheaper. You get a discount on your
You do, that's right, I remember, yes.
But that's the only real reason to go there. It's the same, similar to Nepal, spring and October. They're the best months. If you do go to slightly higher accommodation like the Pobjika Valley, where you see the blackneck cranes, that gets a little bit cold if you're there in October, November. But as I said, these hotel rooms have these bukari, these stoves. So the rooms themselves are nice and cozy, but you might want a nice, maybe a light down jacket in October, November, some of these higher places. And winter, yeah, great time. Go for Christmas. What a lovely trip that would be. But maybe take a down jacket with you for the passes for a couple of nights at a higher altitude. But in general, it's a very comfortable climate, very pleasant. Punakha is quite hot actually at times because it's very low at 1,200 meters.
That's right. In fact, we have one question here asking about temperature variations, and it does vary quite considerably depending on your altitude, of course. And if you're coming across the border from India, then of course on the lower parts it can be very hot and steamy. But generally, when you're running along the top, it's lovely temperatures. Marc, one for you. It's a good question. Do you need an Indian visa if you're transiting through India en route to Bhutan?
That's okay. There is a long story which I can tell someone someday about that, but the answer is yes, you do. There was apparently an agreement at some stage that it wasn't necessary, but we found out to our detriment that wasn't always recognized. So yes, you will need an Indian visa if coming through India, even if you're connecting. And the reason is that you can't get a through flight ticket through India. So what they will see is you'll have one flight ticket to take you into Delhi or Kolkata, and then a completely separate unconnected flight ticket to take you on. So even if you've got a nice connection time, effectively you are viewed as immigrating into India. So yes, but Indian e-visas will be back in play very, very soon. So it's quite an easy process. But yes, you will need one if transiting through India.
A couple of points here that I'm going to tie together. Perro has a reputation as having one of the top 5 hairiest runways in the world. How possible is it to travel in overland from India? And another one just above saying, be aware of stray dogs in Thimphu. Well, interestingly, when I've traveled often over the border from India into Bhutan through a town called Phunsaling. And what happens there is all the stray dogs from India that get shot every now and again travel across the border themselves into Bhutan where they don't get shot. So that's why you do tend to get a few stray dogs. Can you travel overland? Absolutely. There are 2 or even 3 good border crossings. Is that right, Marc?
Yeah, the ones that we've generally used is coming in from West Bengal. So if you're coming from Darjeeling, you can enter that way. And if you want to travel right the way through to the east of the country, you'll remember the name of it. There's quite a long, a town with a long name that you can exit, and you can fly out of Guwahati in Assam, and that can give you access to Kaziranga National Park, which is great for seeing the one-horned rhino. Or if you want to go and visit Nagaland and that area, you can visit there. But yeah, and I'm not sure, is the border in the central one open, Bradley? I know that there's 3 roads predominantly coming south.
Yeah, it is open. It's a place called Gelefu. So if you want to get extremely off the beaten track, then that's a great place to exit, but you end up in the middle of nowhere in Assam. So you have to check how you're going to get onwards from there. And the border crossing on the right is Sandrup Junka, which takes you down to Guwahati.
Paul, no problem that you missed the first half of the presentation. You will be getting an email tomorrow with the link so you can watch the first half there. Let's have a look. Thank you very much. Photographs, Bradley. I've always, interestingly, Marc, you mentioned it on the visa form that one should be polite and ask, but I've never had problems photographing Bhutanese people. Would you agree with that, Bradley?
Yeah, Bhutanese are very friendly. They don't really have any hang-ups about having their photographs taken. Of course, you should always ask. That's just basic politeness, if you ask me. But there's no real cultural issues that makes this a problem. The Bhutanese are very proud, especially when they're wearing their national dress. They're very proud to have their photos taken. They love having their kids taken pictures of. So yeah, no problem with that at all.
And Marc, you're now getting asked more visa questions. What about through Nepal?
Through Nepal, you get a visa on arrival.
On
if
arrival.
connected. But yeah, you'll still need a visa, but very easy for Nepal.
I'm going to finish off now. I see we're gone 7:15, so sorry for people that we haven't answered question, but there is one interesting one right at the end, which Bradley, I'll throw over to you, which is, and it was very interesting what you were talking about Bhutan becoming, I think, possibly the first country that is carbon positive, and obviously has a fantastic kind of sustainability record. The question from Marc is, what is done to keep the tourism sustainable and to maintain its carbon stable status?
Well, I think the main thing is that it doesn't have mass tourism. You know, the numbers of tourists coming to Bhutan are still quite small. That's the whole point of high value, low volume tourism. So the impact or the carbon that's generated by the tourism industry is relatively light compared to other industries. A lot of hotels have fairly sustainable practices. Apart from that, you know, there's lots of village homestay programs that are more about kind of sustainable local tourism. They haven't really taken off that well in Bhutan because, you know, when you're spending $300-400 a night, you don't really want to sleep on the floor in someone's house. So they haven't really worked out that problem yet. But yeah, in general, it's not really tourism that they focus on that much in terms of sustainability or environmentalism. It's more protecting the rest of the landscape into keeping the cultural and physical impact of tourism to a minimum. You know, Bhutan is not, as much as we talk about Bhutan as the great last Shangri-La, it's not perfect. So I think I saw one of the questions earlier that was about road construction in Bhutan, and, you know, democracy that did bring a huge number of new roads being built everywhere across Bhutan, because it's a great way to get votes, is to promise a road to someone's village. So so it's not perfect in that way. You will see a lot of road construction. But in general, it's definitely one of the more sustainable places that you can visit. Your carbon, apart from the flight, your impact on the environment is relatively light in Bhutan.
Great. I'm lying. I'm going to now do one last question, which is, do you have any great reading suggestions? One book each, other than The Lonely Planet, probably. Brandon. I'm going to go with Jamie Zappa's Between the Earth and the Sky, which is a wonderful story of a young Canadian woman that goes out there to teach, probably set in, I think, the early 90s, I think, probably. Lovely book, Jamie Zappa. Bradley?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. It's been such a long time since I've read any books. Most of the books on Bhutan are memoirs by people who have taught there. You're right.
Yeah. Perhaps that was unfair of me to throw that at you both. Never mind. Go with Jamie.
Looking through The Lonely Planet for some good suggestions.
Well, perhaps that's what Celia. There you are. You'll have to do that as well. Guys, thank you so much. Bradley, fantastic. Really inspiring, really interesting, fascinating talk on what is, you know, still one of the world's great and most interesting destinations. Marc, as always, wonderful descriptions and stuff and explanation of the group tour. And lastly, thank you to everyone for watching. It's been great. We've still got a large number of people there right at the end at 7:20, so that's wonderful. Thank you all very much indeed. And we'll be back on the 19th of January with Kate Humble doing a talk on India. So thanks so much. Good night.